Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast which celebrates the amazing achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm your host, Kerry Lush from the podcast station. I'm a freelance writer, podcast host and coach, and I'm a former ABC radio broadcaster. Join me each week as we meet some of the extraordinary women who call this region home. This is Riverland Women. She's produced and performed cabaret productions, been a radio host, a podcaster. She's now a teacher, a mum, and a marriage celebrant. Hayley Ramsay-Watkinson from Renmark is definitely not one to sit idle. She's packed a lot into her life in the Riverland, but it hasn't been without heartbreak either, particularly when the time came to start a family. Late last year, I sat down with Hayley and her then 2-week-old baby Theodore to talk about all of those things and much more. As I normally do, I started by asking her, who is Hayley?
I guess I've had lots of different versions of Hayley over the time. I am currently a high school teacher and leader at Loxton High School on maternity leave for a little while, and former radio presenter, occasional podcaster, music theatre performer, enthusiast, and also wife, mum, friend, and lover of chocolate and coffee and Netflix, really.
So how did you end up here?
I was pursuing theatre and performing for a number of years after study, and I was living in Melbourne and my uncle passed away, and it was one of those moments where I'm like, you know what, this isn't working. I want to be back in SA, closer to my family, and radio had actually always been something that I thought could be a really interesting path to pursue. So I moved back to Adelaide, did a short course with Sean Craig Murphy, and then was looking for radio gigs, and the job at Magic and 5RM came up and I applied. I was actually overseas at the time and did my interview sitting on my friend's couch in Edinburgh and got the job. And I sort of have always been drawn to water, so I sort of had this idea that I would perhaps move. I knew would have to move for radio, so I thought perhaps I would move, beachside, maybe Port Lincoln or the coast, but the river was the one that sort of called. I had a couple of Christmases in the Riverland growing up. We've got some family here, and so I moved here in 2012 and was on radio for a couple of years. Thought that I'd maybe be here for 18 months, 2 years perhaps, until maybe something different was calling, thinking that I'd sort of continue down the radio path. But that was not to be, and that was about 11 years ago now. So, I was in a relationship here for a while, and then the love of the river life and different career opportunities presented, and my now husband moved up. We've bought a house, we've got our kids now, we've got, great job opportunities, and here we are. So for the foreseeable future, we'll be Riverlanders and love it.
So what made you look outside of radio and think that you'd like to go with education?
I think that I always knew that teaching, growing up, I was always playing schools and always had that love of school and learning and teaching. And I sort of always felt like it was something that I would do at some point. But I knew myself, and I knew that I had to really pursue some of my creative solo opportunities first, because I didn't want to be that bitter drama teacher who never got to, make it on the stage herself. So after, radio just sort of wasn't, I loved it, but it kind of, the next door didn't really open in the way that I thought it might. Then I was sort of dabbling in a bit of events. I had a wedding business for a little bit, and then I decided that studying teaching would be sort of a good, it was a good time at that point. And then I had a great placement, and then there was a job opportunity at Loxton High School, and then here we are. So I think I was always meant to be a teacher, but just took me a little while to get there.
So it's been quite organic how it's worked out.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that, I always trusted that it would happen at the right time. It's sort of obviously lots of country teaching opportunities, and I've been able to get a great gig at a great school and also move into leadership and have a little bit of time with family as well. So, I've been really fortunate to have some time off with my daughter and now with my son, and I've got a little celebrant side hustle as well. So it's sort of teaching allows me to sort of pursue a few things kind of outside. I've sort of got a pretty good work-life balance at the moment, which is great.
So do you like to have other things on the go, things to keep you busy, keep your mind active as well?
I guess I do, yes. I think, I would say that that's my natural state is a few things on the go. And it's nice. I rarely get bored and I'm able to fulfill different parts of myself, which I think is really nice. I managed to do the Riverland Musical Society show this year as well, which was so nice to do something that was just purely about, my artistic passions. So, I think busy, lots of balls in the air, juggling is kind of where I thrive, I guess, yeah.
So, and like you mentioned, acting is not new to you. You've had written, produced and acted in your own stage show as well. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so at uni I studied musical theatre at the University of Ballarat, and we wrote cabaret shows in our final year, and I loved that, absolutely loved it. And so continued to develop my cabaret show and took that to the Adelaide Fringe a couple of times, performed in Edinburgh one year, have done different iterations of my cabarets here in the Riverland for some fundraisers, and did it at as a little staff gig during COVID when we all needed a bit of a laugh at school. And I have really enjoyed being able to create something of my own and do that. It's been a little while since I've written anything to go on stage, but I've got about 5 or 6 ideas cooking, so I might get back to a fringe maybe in the next couple of years again.
Oh, what sort of things are you looking at?
I think 90s girl groups are, could be something. I've got a bit of an idea of a show around that. My first show was called Not So Secret Bridesmaids Business, about sort of always a bridesmaid, never a bride, and I've had a few different life experiences since then in terms of getting married and having children. So I think motherhood and being a teacher and there's lots of things in my life that I reckon I could probably amplify into a little cabaret. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Now, another creative aspect you've had is your podcast. Tell me how that came about and how that's developed and what's next for that.
A friend of mine, we both were trying unsuccessfully to fall pregnant for a long time and moved into IVF, and we were both very fortunate to get pregnant through IVF around the same time. So Rochelle and I were, I certainly was getting a lot from podcasts that existed in the infertility, trying to conceive space. And I thought that a pregnancy podcast after IVF was a perspective that I hadn't come across too often. So we decided that we would just share our pregnancy journey. We had a little podcast called Bumped, and that was really nice to sort of reflect on and I guess create kind of a lasting memory of our pregnancies. And then we managed to kind of share our birth stories, and then we sort of got caught up in, raising little girls. But we've actually both since had a little boy. Rochelle, my friend, conceived naturally, and I went through IVF again to get little Theodore. So we have discussed maybe coming back together to record a bit of an overview of our pregnancies and our birth stories as well. And one thing that I felt was a really beautiful silver lining of struggling to conceive and going through IVF was that idea that, you sort of, better and then you do better. And since going through that, I've really loved being a good friend to people who are struggling, because you sort of know their experience, a bit more about what to say. So anything that I can do, whether it's a conversation or a podcast, that can help people sort of feel a bit more connected in what can be a really lonely experience. So that was really nice to we didn't have a huge viral hit on our hands, but we had some lovely listeners that enjoyed that sharing of stories, and that's exactly what you're doing, Kerry. I think women sharing stories is so cathartic, and it's so empowering and helps us connect. So if I'm contributing to that, then that's lovely. And so a few more episodes would be really nice to record. So we'll see how we go with that.
Do you find that infertility is a bit of a taboo conversation, or people don't like to talk about it, a bit like they don't like to talk about miscarriage and grief and all of that, those sorts of hard topics? How have you found that along your journey?
Oh, absolutely. It's taboo is right. I'm not one to keep anything quiet. So if I was feeling it, I would share it. But we, especially women who are used to things, going their way, we are not used to this sort of feeling of failure and this lack of control. And so when my body wasn't doing what it was, quote, supposed to be doing, there was a lot of anger and confusion, and why me, why them, it's really hard. So I think that it's no wonder why people keep it to themselves, because it's pretty heavy. But I've always believed in sharing that, and that's been really helpful for me. So hopefully people do kind of lean into the support networks that are available, and we can sort of break down that taboo a little bit more.
And I guess it's such a fraught time with hormones and the cost and the living regionally. Did you find that harder being in a regional area, having to travel to access fertility treatment?
Yeah, absolutely. There's physically what's happening with your body with IVF. I was really lucky to go a fairly low medication route, so I was not experiencing huge amounts of hormonal kind of changes and things like that. So I was really fortunate that I was able to do that. So there's the physical, there's absolutely the emotional, but then there's the logistics and the financial of, sometimes leading into a transfer or perhaps an egg collection or whatever kind of part you're up to. You could be getting, I think there was one point where I think in about 10 days I had about 7 or 8 blood tests. So all of those blood tests need to be scheduled in, and I'm lucky that I had a little bit of, I guess, flexibility at work, but also that I was able to communicate that and had a really understanding workplace. So I was able to, whip out for an appointment or this or that, but not everyone is in that situation. And I know women who have had to use sick leave or holiday leave and all of that just with the hope of getting pregnant, let alone, what they then need to do after that. So living regionally, I was, we're quite lucky that we're not, completely remote, because, we've got the ability to get blood tests and ultrasounds and those things here. But anything bigger than that, I needed to travel to Adelaide, and, that's again another logistic challenge that you're navigating. And is it a work day? Is it, is it this, having another kid, are they in care? Are they coming down with us? Like it's, the mental load of infertility and IVF is as significant as anything else that you've got to, schedule and diarise and things like that. And I have to acknowledge my financial privilege. My husband and I are both in education, so we have, security in our jobs. We have leave conditions that allow us to, pursue IVF with some support from our workplace. So we were able to keep going, whereas lots of families would absolutely have to make a decision about where that money is going to come from and whether they can continue to try to grow their family or start their family, and that might be a financial decision ultimately. So it's all of those things, all of those factors, and we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars, which for us, we're so grateful that it's been kind of worth it, because we have 2 beautiful babies. But there's plenty of couples who are spending that and then are still without, which is, really tough.
So what does the future hold for Hayley and family and life and everything else?
Well, this 2-kid thing is my greatest challenge at the moment. Thought, being pregnant with a toddler was one challenge, and now we've got a baby and a toddler who's, equally as passionate about wanting time and love and cuddles and all that. So, I think family is definitely the priority at the moment. I am, as you said, I'm a busy person. I've always got something on the go, but this is the life that I have dreamed of for so long. And so what my learning is just to kind of stay in the present and focus on what's happening now and how lucky I am, and not always be racing to that next thing. I think there might be, a few caravan trips this year, adjusting to a bit less income in this rising cost of living. So I think there might be lots of maybe cooking lessons and homemade bits and pieces. And I will continue. So I'll return to paid work at school towards the end of 2024, but I'll resume some weddings in the next couple of months as well. So as my little side gig as a celebrant is something that has largely been word of mouth so far, and it's such a beautiful job that I have. So I think that this year, or this coming year, I'd like to just sort of be a bit more intentional about growing that and getting a little bit more momentum happening. And I think that's probably enough for me for now. Yeah, slow down, but also keep doing a million things.
How did the celebrant vocation come about? Was that someone getting married and you thought, I'd like to marry them?
Oh, it's so funny. Yes. It's another one similar to my teaching story. I found this post, as Facebook reminds you of all your very cringy posts when, Facebook was a new thing. So it was about 13 years ago that I had a post about wanting to become a celebrant. So I've always loved weddings. I've always loved public speaking. I've loved writing. I've love working with people. So it was another, I guess, little kind of thought, little career idea that had just been a little seed in the back of my mind for a long time. And then some friends of ours, I was at a wedding and I was probably a few champagnes in, just talking about, possibly, I'd love to be a celebrant. And then in the light of day, some friends of mine were like, are you serious? Because we would love for you to be our celebrant. And their wedding was about a year and a bit in the future. So I was like, all right, well, let's do it. I was on leave with Piper and did the online course. And once I sort of started kind of spreading the word, a few sort of friends or friends of friends, that kind of word of mouth started spreading, and I had a couple of bookings. And then since then it's just kind of been a steady growth. And I think it's a lot of my skill set come together in terms of working with people and creating this really special ceremony for them, and being able to dress up and pop out to a wedding on a Saturday afternoon is really fun. And I really love it. I feel very honoured to be able to kind of be working with couples that are getting married, because it's such a special time. And so it's not something that I need to become this mega career, mega money maker, but if I can continue to do handfuls of weddings in the peak season, it's just such a lovely little thing. And again, it just felt like the timing was right to jump into that, and we'll sort of see where that goes.
I guess it's not the sort of job that you can rely on for your sole income. It's kind of limited with when you can do it and times of the year and weekends.
Absolutely, yes. It's I know, probably in Adelaide, I think it would be easier to move it to your full-time gig, but I did have one weekend where I had 2 weddings on the one day, which I know lots and lots of celebrants do, but that was a bit too stressful for me. So, it worked out beautifully, and both of them were so lovely, and, there wasn't any, disaster or anything like that. But as a just to not be able to kind of just focus on the one thing. So
not say the wrong names or something.
That's
like
right. Yeah, and just the logistics of getting, you know, one side of town to the other and a quick freshen up in between. And yeah, so it's not something that I think will become my full-time job, but something that's a really lovely, you know, additional thing. And working part-time in education and then a couple of weddings, it's a nice balance at the moment.
Well, Hayley, congratulations on the birth of Theodore. Thank you very much for having a chat to me on Riverland Women.
It has been my pleasure, and he's not normally a noisy feeder, but he obviously wanted to get involved there. But yeah, thank you, Kerry, and all the best.
Thank you. Maybe an early career in radio for him.
No doubt.
That was Hayley Ramsay-Watkinson from Renmark. You can find Hayley on Instagram by searching for Riverland Celebrant. You can also find Riverland Women and the podcast station on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Thanks for listening to Riverland Women.